Captain Hyunwoo stared at his screen in disbelief. After 15 years of patrolling the outer rim of Calreth space, he had never seen anything like this. His ship, the Stellar Wind, was on a routine border check when the sensors picked up something impossible. "What is that thing?" asked Lieutenant Boram from her position at the weapons console. Her voice carried the same confusion that Hyunwoo felt. The object on their screen was massive. It looked like a ship, but it was bigger than anything in their military database. The energy readings made no sense either. The vessel seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like it was not completely real. "Commander So-min, are you getting this?" Hyunwoo called to the captain of the sister ship Void Hunter, which was patrolling nearby. "I see it, Hyunwoo. My science officer is going crazy trying to figure out what it is." So-min's voice crackled over the communication system. "The computer says the hull is made of materials that don't exist." Hyunwoo watched the strange ship drift silently through space. It was not moving toward them or away from them. It just hung there, like it was watching. The thought made him uncomfortable. "Sir, should we report this to command?" asked Ensign Dongmin from the communication station. "Not yet. Let's try to get closer and gather more information first." Hyunwoo knew that Admiral Tae-hyung would want solid facts, not wild stories, about ghost ships. As the Stellar Wind moved closer, the readings became even stranger. The ship appeared to be scanning everything around it, but with technology that their sensors could barely detect. It was like watching someone use tools that were centuries ahead of anything the Calreth Empire had developed. "Captain, I'm getting some weird readings from the ship's interior," reported Science Officer Minho. "There are life forms aboard, but I can't identify the species. The signatures don't match anything in our database." Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. The Calreth Empire had conquered dozens of worlds over the past 3 centuries. They had detailed records of every intelligent species in this part of the galaxy. If this ship contained unknown aliens, it could mean they had missed something important during their expansion. "Try to get a better scan of their technology," he ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with." For the next hour, both Calreth ships studied the mysterious vessel. The more they learned, the more worried they became. The ship's power output was enormous, far beyond anything their own dreadnoughts could produce. Its weapon systems, if they were weapons, were completely unfamiliar. "Sir, it's moving," announced Navigator Haewon. The alien ship began to turn slowly as if it had finished whatever it was doing. For a moment, Hyunwoo thought it might attack. Instead, something even more disturbing happened. The ship simply vanished. One second it was there, filling their screens with impossible energy readings. The next second, empty space. Not even a trace remained to show it had ever existed. "What just happened?" Boram asked, her hand still hovering over the weapon controls. "I don't know," Hyunwoo admitted. "Minho, are you picking up anything? Any residual energy? Any trail we can follow?" "Nothing, sir. It's like the ship was never here." The science officer sounded shaken. "But that's impossible. Something that large can't just disappear without leaving some kind of trace." Hyunwoo made his decision. "Dongmin, send a priority message to Admiral Tae-hyung. Tell him we encountered an unknown vessel of superior technology that vanished without explanation. Include all our sensor data." "Yes, sir." As the message was transmitted, Hyunwoo could not shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something that would change everything. The Calreth Empire had ruled this sector of space for centuries through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. They had never faced a challenge they could not overcome. This ship, however, represented something different, something that might be beyond their ability to handle. "Commander So-min, what do you think we just saw?" he asked over the communication link. "I think we saw trouble, Hyunwoo. Big trouble." Back on Calreth Prime, Admiral Tae-hyung received the report while reviewing fleet positions in his command center. He had served the Empire for 40 years and had seen many strange things in space. But this report made him pause. "An unknown ship that can disappear at will," he muttered to himself. "With technology beyond our understanding." He called for his aide, a young officer named Junho. "Get me a meeting with the Emperor's Council, and contact Intelligence Director Yun-Su." I want to know if we've had any other sightings like this. Within hours, the answer came back. There had been 3 similar sightings in the past month, all along the Empire's border worlds. Each time a massive unknown ship had appeared, conducted some kind of scanning operation, and then vanished without a trace. 3 centuries, Admiral, Taehyung said to his staff. For 3 centuries, nothing has challenged our dominance in this sector. Now we have ships appearing that make our best vessels look like toys. Sir, should we increase patrols along the border? Asked his chief of staff, Captain Kyung-soo. Yes, but more than that. I want the 3rd Fleet mobilized and ready for combat. If these ships belong to a hostile force, we need to be prepared for war. The Admiral did not know that his response was exactly what the unknown ship's occupants had expected. They had been watching the Calreth Empire for months, studying their military responses and political structure. They knew that the Empire's first instinct would be to respond with force. This knowledge was part of a larger plan that had been 3 centuries in the making. Far away, in a place the Calreth Empire had forgotten, other ships like the one Hyunwoo had encountered were preparing for the next phase of their mission. Their crews had waited a long time for this moment. They had traveled far from home, carrying with them the memories of worlds destroyed and peoples enslaved. The Calreth Empire thought they were dealing with an unknown enemy. They were wrong. They were dealing with ghosts from their own past, returning to settle old debts. The mysterious ship had appeared and vanished, leaving behind only questions and fear. But it had accomplished its real mission. It had announced to the Empire that their time of unchallenged rule was ending. Soon, the Empire would learn that some crimes are too great to be forgotten, and some victims refuse to stay dead. The unknown ship was just the beginning. What came next would test everything the Calreth Empire believed about their own power and place in the galaxy. Captain Hyunwoo continued his patrol, unaware that his sighting report had set in motion events that would reshape the known galaxy. The stellar wind moved through space, its crew alert for any sign of the mysterious vessel's return. They would not have to wait long. Chief Science Officer Jin-ho had not slept in 3 days. The quantum residue left behind by the mysterious ship was unlike anything he had ever studied. His laboratory aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge looked like a war zone, with data screens covering every available surface and his research team working around the clock. The readings still don't make sense, complained Dr. Young-soo, his assistant. According to our instruments, this ship existed in multiple dimensions at the same time. That should be impossible. Jin-ho rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the data again. Maybe our understanding of what's possible needs to change. This technology is clearly beyond anything we know. Across the ship, Intelligence Director Yoon-soo was having her own problems. Reports were flooding in from all over the Empire's border worlds. The pattern was always the same. A massive unknown ship would appear, scan Imperial installations for exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, then vanish completely. Ma'am, we've now confirmed sightings at 17 different systems, reported her aide, Lieutenant Hanna. Each appearance follows the same timeline down to the second. That level of precision suggests military discipline, Yoon-soo mused. This isn't some random exploration. Someone is conducting a systematic reconnaissance of our defenses. She pulled up a star map showing all the sighting locations. The pattern that emerged made her blood run cold. The unknown ships were not just scanning random targets. They were specifically focusing on systems that housed major military bases, shipyards, and weapons research facilities. They're mapping our entire military structure, she realized. Whoever they are, they're preparing for war. Meanwhile, Captain Hyunwoo had been assigned to lead a special task force designed to track down the mysterious vessels. His team included the experimental stealth frigate Silent Strike, commanded by Captain Da-yoon, the youngest ship commander in the Imperial fleet. Da-yoon was brilliant, ambitious, and feared by many of her peers. At only 32 years old, she had already earned a reputation for taking risks that others would not dare attempt. Her ship was equipped with the latest cloaking technology and the most advanced sensors the Empire could produce. If anyone can catch these ghosts, it's her, Admiral Taehyung had told Hyunwoo during the briefing. The task force's first real opportunity came at the mining world of Xerion 7th. Intelligence predicted that the unknown ship would appear there based on the established pattern. Dayun positioned the silent strike in a cloaked orbit, while Hyunwoo's stellar wind waited at the edge of the system. At exactly 14:30 local time, the ship materialized. "There it is," whispered Dayun's sensor operator, Ensign Taimin. "Same configuration as before, but I'm getting much better readings from this distance." Dayun studied the vessel through her ship's advanced sensors. It was even more impressive up close. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and the energy patterns were so complex that her computer could not analyze them properly. "Begin. Approach," she ordered. "Keep us cloaked and maintain minimum power to all systems except sensors." As the silent strike moved closer, the readings became more detailed. The unknown ship was not just scanning the mining facility below, it was downloading massive amounts of data from the Imperial computers. Somehow it had broken through security systems that were supposed to be impossible to hack. "Captain, they're accessing our tactical databases," reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Sun Ho. "They're copying everything, ship specifications, defensive protocols, fleet positions." Dayun felt sick. If this information reached a hostile government, the Empire's military secrets would be worthless. "Can we stop the download?" "Not without revealing our position," Sun Ho replied. "And even then, I don't think our weapons could penetrate whatever shielding they're using." For 13 minutes, Dayun watched helplessly as the unknown ship systematically stole the Empire's most sensitive military information. She was about to order a desperate attack when something unexpected happened. The ship detected them. Despite the silent strike's advanced cloaking system, the alien vessel somehow knew they were there. It turned slowly to face their position, and for a terrifying moment, Dayun thought they were about to be destroyed. Instead, the ship transmitted a message directly to the silent strike. The signal bypassed all their communication filters and played on every screen aboard the ship. The voice that spoke was calm, almost gentle, but the words it used made everyone freeze. "Your Empire's crimes have been noted. Judgment approaches." The message was delivered in perfect Calrethian, with no accent or translation errors. Whoever was speaking had not learned their language recently. They had been studying it for a long time. Before Dayun could respond, the ship vanished, leaving behind only empty space and a crew of shaken Imperial officers. "Did that just happen?" asked Taimin, staring at his blank sensors. "Record everything," Dayun ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I want a complete analysis of that message. Voice patterns, transmission methods, everything." She opened a communication channel to Hyunwoo. "Captain, we need to talk, and we need to get this information to Admiral Tai Hyung immediately." The report reached Imperial Command within hours. Emperor Jae-sung himself read the transcript of the alien message, and for the first time in his 20-year reign he felt genuine fear. "Crimes?" he asked his advisors. "What crimes are they talking about?" General Wu Jin, the Empire's supreme military commander, was dismissive. "Propaganda, Your Majesty. Our enemies always accuse us of crimes when they lack the strength to face us honestly." But Dr. Kyungmi, the Empire's chief xenobiologist, had a different theory. She had been studying the ship's design and technology, comparing it to every known species in their databases. What she found was disturbing. "Your Majesty, I believe these ships belong to a species we have encountered before," she announced, during an emergency council session. "Impossible," General Wu Jin objected. "We have detailed records of every intelligent species in this sector. None of them possess this level of technology." "That's correct, General. None of the surviving species possess this technology." Dr. Kyungmi activated a holographic display showing Imperial conquest records. "But there was one species we encountered during the expansion period that we believed we had completely eliminated." The display showed a small blue planet in the outer rim, listed in Imperial records as Target World 347. The conquest had been routine, carried out 3 centuries ago when the Empire was still establishing its dominance. "The inhabitants called themselves humans," Dr. Kyungmi continued. They had barely achieved interplanetary travel when we encountered them. Their resistance was fierce but ultimately futile. We destroyed their homeworld and scattered their colonies. Then how could they have developed this technology? Demanded the Emperor. Because we may not have eliminated them all, the xenobiologist replied quietly. The humans were unique among the species we conquered. They were the only ones who never developed faster-than-light communication. When their world was attacked, any survivors would have been completely cut off from each other. The implication hung in the air like a poison cloud. If human survivors had escaped to distant colonies, they would have had 3 centuries to develop their technology in secret, 3 centuries to plan their return. Impossible, General Wu Jin repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain Hyunwoo, who had been listening to the briefing, remembered something his grandmother had told him years ago. She had been a soldier during the old expansion campaigns, and she had served in the attack on Target World 347. General, my grandmother fought in that campaign, he said carefully. She told me the humans were different from other species we conquered. Even when their cities were burning, even when they knew they couldn't win, they kept fighting, and they kept transmitting messages into deep space. Messages to whom? Asked the Emperor. To anyone who would listen, sir. To colonies we didn't know existed, to ships that might be out there somewhere. They promised that someone would remember. What happened? Someone would come back. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Calreth Empire had built its power on the complete destruction of its enemies. But what if one enemy had not been completely destroyed? What if they had been preparing for 3 centuries to return? The unknown ship was no longer unknown. It was a ghost from the Empire's past, returning to collect a debt that had been growing interest for 300 years. And based on the technology they had displayed, the Empire was about to learn that some debts cannot be ignored forever. Emperor Jae-sung paced back and forth in his private council chamber, his ornate robes trailing behind him. The golden walls that usually comforted him now seemed to close in. Reports were flooding in from across the Empire, and each one was more disturbing than the last. 17 different systems, he muttered to himself. How is that possible? General Wu Jin spread the tactical displays across the massive conference table. Red markers showed where the unknown ships had appeared, creating a pattern that made no military sense according to traditional thinking. Your Majesty, our best scientists confirm it's impossible for any ship to be in 17 places at the same time, the general reported. But the sensor data is clear. These appearances were simultaneous, not sequential. Dr. Kyungmi looked up from her data pad, her face pale. General, what if we're not dealing with one ship? What if there are multiple vessels all using the same technology? The thought sent a chill through everyone in the room. One ship with impossible technology was bad enough. A fleet of such vessels could destroy the Empire. How many? The Emperor asked quietly. Unknown, Your Majesty. But based on the coordination we've observed, we could be looking at hundreds of ships, possibly thousands. Captain Hyunwoo had been granted special permission to attend the council meeting. His direct experience with the unknown vessel made his insights valuable, even though his rank was far below the other attendees. Your Majesty, there's something else, he said carefully. My grandmother served in the campaign against Target, World 347. Before she died, she told me something that didn't make sense at the time. Continue, the Emperor commanded. She said the humans were different from other species we conquered. They didn't just fight for their world. They fought for their children, for people they would never meet, for futures they would never see. Even when they knew they were going to die, they kept sending messages into space. Messages saying what? Demanded General Wu Jin. That someone would remember. Someone would come back. She said they weren't just transmitting to their own colonies. They were sending detailed records of everything we did to them. Every battle, every massacre, every civilian target we destroyed. Dr. Kyungmi's datapad chimed with an urgent message. Her research team had finished analyzing the voice patterns from the alien transmission. What they found changed everything. Your Majesty, the linguistic analysis is complete, she announced. The being who spoke to Captain Da-un was not using a translation device. They were speaking native Calrethian with dialectal patterns that date back 3 centuries. That's impossible, General Wu Jin protested. No alien species speaks our ancient dialects. Unless they learned our language 3 centuries ago and preserved it exactly as it was spoken then, Dr. Kyung Mi replied. The voice patterns match linguistic records from the expansion period. Whoever spoke to us learned Calrethian during the time we were conquering their homeworld. The implications hit everyone at the same time. These were not just survivors, these were witnesses. They had been studying the Empire for 300 years, learning their language, understanding their culture, preparing for this moment. Intelligence. Director Yuunsu entered the chamber carrying a data crystal that glowed with urgent priority markers. Your Majesty, we've intercepted something that you need to see immediately. She activated the chamber's holographic display, and suddenly the room was filled with images that made everyone step back in shock. The display showed the interior of the unknown ship, revealing its occupants for the first time. They were humanoid, bipedal, with features that seemed almost familiar. But their eyes held something that the Calreth had not seen in 3 centuries of conquest. Absolute determination, backed by superior technology. These images were transmitted on an open channel to every major government in the galaxy, Yunsu explained. It's not a secret message. It's a public announcement. The transmission began with a simple statement in dozens of languages, including, Perfect Calrethian. We are the children of Target World 347. We have returned. What followed was a detailed historical record that made everyone in the chamber feel sick. The humans had not just survived the destruction of their homeworld. They had documented everything. Every war crime, every civilian massacre, every species. The Empire had driven to extinction. But more disturbing than the historical records was what came next. The transmission showed the human colonies that had survived in the deep void, the generations of ships that had carried survivors to distant stars, and the civilization they had built over 3 centuries of exile. It was not a civilization based on conquest and domination. It was something the Empire had never seen before. A cooperative federation where dozens of species worked together as equals. The humans had not spent 3 centuries planning revenge. They had spent them building something better. How is this possible? Whispered Emperor Jae-sung. We destroyed them. We made sure of it. The answer came from the transmission itself. A human who identified herself only as Admiral Sarah spoke directly to the camera with calm authority. The Calreth Empire believes it destroyed humanity 3 centuries ago. They were wrong. They destroyed our homeworld. They scattered our colonies. They killed millions of our people. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated what humans do when you threaten our children. The display showed images of generation ships fleeing into the deep void, carrying not just human survivors, but refugees from other species the Empire had targeted. It showed the hidden colonies they had built in unexplored systems, the alliances they had forged with species the Empire had never encountered. We spent 300 years learning from every species that would share their knowledge with us, Admiral Sarah continued. We combined human determination with Altarian science, vegan engineering, and the wisdom of a dozen other civilizations. We built something the galaxy has never seen, a true democracy of species working toward common goals. General Wu Jin was studying the technical specifications that accompanied the transmission. His face went white as he read the data. Your Majesty, their technology is not just advanced, it's revolutionary. They've solved problems that our scientists said were impossible, such as simultaneous faster-than-light travel to multiple locations, energy weapons that can reconfigure matter at the quantum level, defensive systems that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The general's voice grew quieter with each specification. Your Majesty, this is not just superior technology. This is technology that makes our entire fleet obsolete. The transmission concluded with a message that left no room for misunderstanding. The Calreth Empire will answer for its crimes. We do not seek conquest. We seek justice. Your military forces are hereby ordered to stand down and prepare for the establishment of transitional governments on all occupied worlds. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Emperor Jaesung stared at the display for a long moment after the transmission ended. 3 centuries of unchallenged rule had made the empire arrogant. They had forgotten that their power was based on being stronger than their enemies, not on being invincible. "How do we fight them?" he asked quietly. "I don't think we can," admitted General Wu Jin. "Their technology is centuries beyond ours. They've had 300 years to prepare for this moment, while we've grown comfortable and complacent." "Then what do you recommend?" The general looked around the chamber at the other advisors, hoping someone else would speak first. When no one did, he forced himself to say the words that went against everything he had been taught. "Surrender, Your Majesty," before they decide that talking is pointless. But even as the word left his lips, everyone in the room knew it was already too late. The Empire had built its reputation on never showing weakness, never backing down from a fight. That reputation made it impossible for them to surrender, even when surrender was the only rational choice. They were trapped by their own success, forced to fight a war they could not win because their entire identity was based on being undefeatable. The humans had counted on this reaction. They had studied the Empire for 3 centuries and understood its psychology perfectly. Captain Hyun Woo looked at the tactical displays and realized something that made his blood run cold. The human ships had not appeared randomly across the Empire's borders. They had appeared at specific locations, chosen to force the Empire into making predictable responses. The humans were not just technologically superior, they were tactically brilliant. They had maneuvered the Empire into a position where every choice led to the same outcome: total defeat. The unknown ship had appeared and vanished, but its mission was complete. It had delivered a message that changed everything. The victims of the Empire's greatest crime had returned, and they had brought judgment with them. What happened next would determine whether the Calreth Empire would learn to coexist with its former victims, or whether 3 centuries of conquest would end in total annihilation. Admiral Taehyung stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the largest fleet ever assembled in Calreth history. 200 ships stretched across space in perfect battle formation, their weapons charged and shields at maximum power. The Nexus station hung behind them like a steel moon, bristling with defensive weapons and docking bays. "Sir, all ships report ready for battle," announced his aide, Captain Kyung-soo. "If the human ship appears here as predicted, we'll be ready." The admiral nodded, but his confidence was not as strong as he tried to appear. The intelligence reports painted a picture of technology so advanced that their entire fleet might be useless. Still, he had his orders from the Emperor. The Empire's reputation was built on strength, and they would not surrender without a fight. "Admiral, incoming priority message from the Silent Strike," reported the communications officer. Commander So Min's image appeared on the main screen. She had been promoted after her exceptional service in tracking the human vessels, and her new ship was equipped with the latest stealth technology. "Admiral, I'm detecting some very unusual energy readings from the designated coordinates," she reported. "Whatever's about to happen, it's going to be big." Before Taehyung could respond, space itself seemed to ripple. The human ship materialized exactly where intelligence had predicted, but this time something was different. It was not alone. "Dear gods," whispered Science Officer Jin Ho from his station. "There are dozens of them." The tactical display filled with contacts as ship after ship materialized around the original vessel. They came in sizes ranging from small scouts to massive dreadnoughts, all sharing the same impossible technology that allowed them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the most shocking sight was the flagship itself. As they watched, the vessel began to transform. Its hull reconfigured like living metal, expanding and reshaping until it resembled something that was part courthouse and part weapon of mass destruction. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. "It's on all frequencies directed at the entire fleet. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge belonged to the same human who had transmitted the historical records to the galaxy. Admiral Sarah spoke with calm authority, as if she were addressing a classroom rather than a hostile fleet. "Admiral Taehyung of the Calreth Imperial Fleet. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Federation. We have come to establish a formal tribunal for the prosecution of war crimes committed by the Calreth Empire over the past 3 centuries. Tae-hyung felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the bridge's climate control. This is Admiral Tae-hyung. You are in Imperial space without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral, you seem to misunderstand the situation. We are not in your space. You are in what was once the territory of the Kepler Democratic Union, one of 17 governments your empire destroyed during its expansion period. We are here to restore legitimate authority to these systems. The human admiral paused, and when she continued, her tone carried a hint of sadness. Admiral, our intelligence indicates that you personally commanded the Third Fleet during the pacification of the Altarian colonies 15 years ago. Our records show that you issued orders to minimize civilian casualties during that operation. This has been noted in your favor. Tae-hyung was stunned. How could they have such detailed knowledge of military operations from 15 years ago? More importantly, how did they know about his private orders to his ship commanders to avoid targeting civilian areas? However, Admiral Sarah continued, you also participated in the systematic extermination of the Vegan resistance, the orbital bombardment of New Harmony, and the slave raids against the Centauri colonies. These actions constitute crimes against sapient life under both Imperial and Galactic law. There is no Galactic law, Tae-hyung protested. The Empire recognizes no authority above its own. That is where you are mistaken, Admiral. The human ship began transmitting data directly to the Imperial fleet's computers. We represent the Galactic Confederation, a union of 47 species working together for mutual protection and prosperity. 23 of those species are survivors of Imperial aggression. The rest joined us voluntarily after witnessing your Empire's methods. The data stream showed something that shook Tae-hyung to his core. The humans had not spent 3 centuries planning revenge. They had built a civilization that dwarfed the Empire in both size and technological capability. Systems the Empire had never heard of were now part of a vast federation spanning thousands of worlds. This tribunal will be conducted according to standards established by the Confederation Council, Admiral Sarah announced. You will be given full legal representation and the opportunity to present evidence in your defense. However, the evidence of Imperial war crimes is overwhelming and well documented. Captain Kyung-soo leaned close to the Admiral's ear. Sir, should we attack while they're talking? Tae-hyung looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet. Even without knowing the full capabilities of their technology, he could see that his ships were outnumbered and outgunned. More importantly, the humans had positioned themselves with the tactical precision of master strategists. No, he said, quietly. They want us to attack. They're hoping we'll be stupid enough to fire first so they can claim self-defense when they destroy us. On the screen, Admiral Sarah seemed to read his thoughts. Admiral, your tactical assessment is correct. We would prefer to resolve this matter through legal proceedings rather than military action. However, if you choose to resist, you should know that our defensive capabilities have been thoroughly tested. As if to demonstrate, one of the smaller human ships simply vanished from the tactical display. It reappeared seconds later in the middle of the Imperial formation, directly between 2 heavy cruisers. The ship remained there for exactly 10 seconds, easily within range of dozens of weapons, then returned to its original position. The message was clear. Their shields and stealth capabilities made the Imperial fleet's weapons useless. We have prepared comfortable quarters for you aboard our flagship, Admiral Sarah continued. You will be treated with dignity and respect appropriate to your rank. The trial will be conducted openly, with full media coverage to ensure transparency. And if I refuse? Then you will watch your empire burn, Admiral. We have spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. Every Imperial military installation, every government facility, every planet in your territory has been mapped and analyzed. We can dismantle your entire civilization in a matter of weeks. The tactical officer, Commander Il-sung, looked up from his instruments with fear in his eyes. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout their fleet. Whatever weapons they're charging, the power levels are unlike anything we've ever seen. Tae-hyung realized he was facing an impossible choice. If he surrendered, he would be tried as a war criminal and probably executed. If he fought, his entire fleet would be destroyed and the Empire would still fall. But there was a third option that the humans might not have considered. Admiral Sarah, I have a counter-proposal. I'm listening. Single combat. Your best warrior against mine. If we win, you withdraw and allow the Empire to reform itself. If you win, we surrender unconditionally. There was a long pause before the human admiral responded. When she did, there was something that might have been amusement in her voice. Admiral, this is not a children's story. We are not here to engage in symbolic gestures. We are here to establish justice for the billions of sentient beings your empire has murdered over 3 centuries. Then what do you want? We want you to stand trial for your crimes. We want the imperial government to acknowledge what it has done to the innocent peoples of this galaxy. And we want to establish a new order where no species will ever again face the choice between slavery and extinction. Captain Kyung-soo was monitoring communications throughout the fleet. Admiral, I'm receiving private transmissions from several ship commanders. They want to know if we're really going to surrender to aliens. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Empire's entire identity was built on racial superiority and military dominance. To surrender to the very species they had once tried to exterminate would be a psychological blow that could destroy the imperial system entirely. But Tae-hyung was beginning to understand something that his political masters had missed. The humans were not offering surrender terms because they were weak. They were offering terms because they were strong enough to afford mercy. Admiral Sarah, if I agree to stand trial, what guarantee do I have that the proceedings will be fair? You have the guarantee of 47 species who have chosen cooperation over conquest, Admiral. You have the promise of beings who remember what it was like to be helpless victims of imperial aggression. We will not become what we fought against. Admiral looked around his bridge at officers who had served with him for decades. These were good people who had followed orders and served their empire faithfully. They deserved better than to die in a hopeless battle. Very well, he said finally. I will come aboard your ship for these proceedings, but I want safe passage guaranteed for my fleet. Agreed. Your ships will be allowed to return to Imperial space unharmed. However, Admiral, you should know that this tribunal is just the B. The human tribunal ship was unlike anything Admiral Tae-hyung had ever seen. As his shuttle approached the docking bay, he could see that the vessel's interior was designed not for war but for justice. The corridors were wide and well lit, with viewing screens showing peaceful scenes from dozens of different worlds. Welcome aboard the Restoration, Admiral, said the human officer who met him at the airlock. She was young, perhaps in her 30s, with the kind of calm confidence that came from serving a cause she believed in. I am Commander Lisa Park. I will be your liaison during the proceedings. Tae-hyung followed her through corridors filled with beings from species he recognized, and many he did not. They all wore the same style of uniform with insignia indicating their various specialties. What struck him most was the complete lack of fear or hostility in their expressions. They looked at him with curiosity, even sympathy, but not hatred. How many species are represented on this ship? He asked. 47 different species make up the Confederation, Commander Park replied. The crew of this ship includes representatives from 23 of them. We believe that justice is best served when it reflects the diversity of those who seek it. The courtroom itself was magnificent and terrifying. It resembled an ancient amphitheater, with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing images from across the galaxy. Thriving worlds, diverse civilizations, and peaceful communities that had never known imperial rule. But what dominated the room was the central display, which currently showed a slowly rotating image of a small blue world. Even from the tactical briefings, Tae-hyung recognized it as Target World 347, the human homeworld that had been destroyed 3 centuries ago. That's Earth, Commander Park explained quietly. Our birth world. We wanted everyone involved in these proceedings to remember what we lost and why we're here. Admiral Sarah entered the courtroom wearing not a military uniform, but the simple robes of a judge. She was older than Tae-hyung had expected, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent carrying heavy responsibilities. "Admiral Tae-hyung," she said formally, "you are charged with crimes against sapient life, including but not limited to genocide, forced relocation of civilian populations, destruction of cultural sites, and the systematic enslavement of sentient beings. How do you plead?" Tae-hyung looked around the courtroom at the hundreds of beings watching him. Representatives from species the Empire had conquered sat beside humans who had never seen their homeworld. All of them were waiting for his answer. "I plead not guilty, by reason of military necessity," he said finally. "Everything I did was in service to my empire and the stability of this sector." "Your plea is entered into the record," Admiral Sarah replied. "You have the right to legal representation. We have provided you with advocates familiar with both Imperial and Confederation law." The trial that followed lasted 3 days and changed Tae-hyung's understanding of everything he had served. The evidence presented was overwhelming, not just in its scope, but in its precision. The humans had documented every Imperial military action for 3 centuries, often with better records than the Empire itself maintained. Captain Soo-young, who served as a prosecution witness, presented intelligence data that made Tae-hyung's blood run cold. She had spent years in Imperial intelligence, and her testimony revealed the true scope of Imperial atrocities that even military commanders had not been told about. The civilian casualties were not accidental, she testified. Intelligence protocols specifically called for the targeting of schools, hospitals, and cultural centers to break the will of resistance movements. These orders came directly from Imperial High Command. But what shook Tae-hyung most was the testimony of the survivors. An elderly Altarian named Velthor spoke about watching his family die during the Imperial assault on his homeworld. His words were simple and devastating. "The Calreth soldiers came to our village just before dawn. They said they were looking for weapons, but we had no weapons. We were farmers. They killed everyone anyway, including the children. They said it was to send a message to other villages." The testimony went on for hours, victim after victim describing the systematic brutality that the Empire had used to maintain control. Tae-hyung found himself remembering orders he had given, decisions he had made, actions he had justified in the name of Imperial necessity. On the second day, his defense advocates presented their case. They argued that Tae-hyung had been following orders, that he had tried to minimize casualties when possible, and that he was a product of a system that had taught him to view other species as inferior. "My client is not a monster," argued his lead advocate, a human lawyer named James Rodriguez. "He is a career military officer who served his government faithfully. If we are to judge him harshly for following orders, then we must also judge the system that gave those orders." "That is exactly what we intend to do," Admiral Sarah replied. "This tribunal is not just about individual responsibility. It is about transforming a system that has caused immeasurable suffering across the galaxy." On the third day, they brought in the evidence that broke Tae-hyung's spirit entirely. Dr. Kyung-mi's own research files, obtained from Imperial databases, showed that the Empire's xenobiologists had known that many of the species they were destroying were capable of profound cultural and technological achievements. The reports clearly state that the Vegan civilization had developed mathematics and poetry that surpassed Imperial achievements in both fields, testified Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Confederation's chief xenobiologist. The recommendation was to preserve their cultural works for study. Instead, the order was given to destroy everything to prevent it from inspiring resistance in other species. The final piece of evidence was a recording that made everyone in the courtroom fall silent. It was the last transmission from Earth, sent as Imperial bombardment ships reduced the planet's surface to ash. The voice belonged to a human child, perhaps 10 years old, speaking into a communication device as her world died around her. "Mom says the bad people are going to hurt us, but she also says that someday, our family will come back and make things better. I don't understand what that means, but I hope it's true. I hope someone remembers that we were here and that we mattered." Admiral Sarah had to call a recess as both prosecution and defense teams struggled with their emotions. When the trial resumed, Tae-hyung asked to address the court directly. "I have served the Calreth Empire for 40 years," he began, his voice barely steady. I believed that we were bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. I told myself that the casualties were necessary, that the suffering we caused was justified by the peace we imposed. He paused, looking at the image of Earth that still rotated slowly on the central display. I was wrong. Not about my duty to serve my people, but about what that service should look like. We became monsters because we forgot that other species were people too. We told ourselves that might made right, and we used that philosophy to justify the unjustifiable. The courtroom was completely silent as he continued. I cannot undo what I have done. I cannot bring back the dead or heal the wounds my actions have caused. But I can acknowledge the truth. The Calreth Empire committed crimes against the very concept of civilization. We destroyed beauty, silenced wisdom, and extinguished the light of entire cultures because we were afraid of anything we could not control. Admiral Sarah looked at him for a long moment before speaking. Admiral Taehyung, the court finds you guilty of crimes against sapient life. However, your acknowledgement of responsibility and your genuine remorse are noted. The sentence of this tribunal is that you will serve as a witness to the transformation of your empire. You will help establish new governments on the worlds your fleets once terrorized. You will spend the remainder of your life working to repair the damage you helped cause. And if I refuse, then you will watch from a prison cell as others do, the work you could have helped with. The choice is yours. Taehyung thought of his officers aboard the Imperial fleet, waiting to learn his fate. He thought of the billions of Calreth citizens who had never voted for conquest, but had benefited from its results. Most of all, he thought of that child's voice from Earth, hoping that someone would remember. I accept the tribunal's sentence, he said quietly, and I volunteer to help establish the transitional governments you mentioned. As the formal proceedings concluded, Commander Park approached him with something unexpected, a message from his own fleet. Sir, this came from your communications officer, Captain Kyung-soo. He wanted you to know that the fleet has voted. They're refusing Imperial orders to attack the human ships. They want to negotiate a peaceful transition. For the first time, in 3 days, Taehyung smiled. Perhaps there was hope for his people after all. The judgment had been rendered, but it was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something that had never existed in the galaxy before, a justice system based on rehabilitation rather than revenge, guided by species that had learned to work together instead of fighting for dominance. The unknown ship Hay. Emperor Jae-sung stood in his throne room, watching the holographic displays that showed the collapse of everything his family had built over 3 centuries. Red indicators marked system after system as they declared independence from Imperial rule. The green ones showed worlds that had already joined the Human Confederation voluntarily. Your Majesty, we still control the core systems, General Wu Jin reported, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. If we concentrate our remaining fleets, we can make a final stand at Calreth Prime. The Emperor looked at his oldest advisor and saw the desperation in his eyes. General Wu Jin had served 3 generations of Imperial rulers, and the idea of surrender was more terrifying to him than death itself. With what ships, General? Half our fleet has defected to join the humans. The other half is trapped in systems surrounded by Confederation forces. Jae-sung gestured to the tactical display showing their military positions. We have perhaps 50 ships left that are still loyal and combat-ready. 50 ships can still do significant damage, Your Majesty, if we strike at their command centers and... Accomplish what? The Emperor's voice carried a weariness that had not been there a month ago. They have thousands of ships, technology we cannot match, and the support of every species we have ever oppressed. We would be committing suicide and taking millions of our own people with us. The decision that would end the Calreth Empire came, not from the throne room, but from the bridge of a small frigate on the outer rim. Captain Da-yun, who had first encountered the human message weeks ago, made a choice that changed the course of history. Open a channel to the Confederation fleet, she ordered her communications officer. Captain, we haven't received orders to surrender, protested her first officer, Lieutenant Young Min. We haven't received orders to die uselessly either, .1 replied. And that's what we'll be doing if we follow the Emperor's plan for a final battle. The human commander who appeared on her screen introduced himself as Admiral Marcus Thompson. He was young for such a high rank, with the kind of calm professionalism that Da-Yun had learned to associate with the human military. Captain Da-Yun, I've been hoping to speak with you. Our intelligence indicates that you were the first Imperial officer to receive our initial warning message. We also know that you've been questioning Imperial policies for some time. How could you know that? Because we've been monitoring Imperial communications for months. We know about your protests against the civilian bombardments on Kepler 7. We know about your refusal to participate in the slave raids on the Vegan colonies. We know that you've been trying to serve with honor in a dishonorable system. Da-Yun felt a chill run down her spine. If the humans knew about her private communications, they knew about everyone's private communications. The Empire's secrets had been an open book to them for months. What do you want from me, Admiral? We want you to help us establish a transitional government for the Calreth worlds. Your people will need leaders who understand both their culture and the new reality of galactic politics. You have the respect of your peers and a reputation for fairness that crosses species lines. You want me to betray my own empire? We want you to help save your own people, Admiral Thompson corrected gently. The Empire is ending, Captain. The only question is whether it ends in a final battle that kills millions, or in a negotiated transition that preserves Calreth civilization. Da-Yun looked around her bridge at officers she had served with for years. They were good people who had followed orders because they trusted their leaders. They deserved better than to die in a hopeless last stand. What are your terms? Full amnesty for all Imperial military personnel who surrender peacefully. Calreth worlds will be governed by elected councils that include representation from all species living there. Former Imperial officers who demonstrate genuine commitment to the new order will be offered positions in the Confederation fleet or in the transitional governments, and those who refuse? They will be tried for war crimes if their actions warrant it. But Captain, we're not looking for revenge. We're looking to build something better. Da-Un made her decision. Admiral, I formally surrender the Imperial frigate Silent Strike and request permission to transmit surrender terms to other Imperial vessels. Permission granted, Captain, and welcome to the Galactic Confederation. Within hours, Da-Un's surrender message was being transmitted throughout the Imperial fleet. Ship after ship followed her example, their captains choosing peace over pointless destruction. The psychological effect was devastating to Imperial morale and decisive for the war's outcome. Emperor Jae-Sung received word of the mass surrenders while meeting with his remaining advisors. The news broke the last of his resistance. It's over, he said quietly. Contact the Confederation Command. I wish to discuss surrender terms. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station in the border system, where the first human ship had appeared. Emperor Jae-Sung, accompanied only by a small diplomatic escort, met with Admiral Sarah and representatives from dozens of Confederation member species. Your Majesty, Admiral Sarah began formally, the Galactic Confederation is prepared to accept the surrender of the Calreth Empire. In return, we offer the following terms. What followed was unlike any surrender document in galactic history. Instead of demanding tribute or territory, the humans offered something unprecedented, a path to redemption. All Calreth worlds will transition to representative government within 2 years. Former Imperial citizens will be granted full rights under Confederation law. Calreth military personnel who surrender peacefully will be offered retraining for civilian careers or positions in the Confederation fleet. And what of me? The Emperor asked. You will stand trial for your role in Imperial war crimes. However, if you cooperate fully with the transition process and help establish legitimate governments on your former worlds, the tribunal will consider a sentence of exile rather than imprisonment. Jae-Sung looked around the room at beings whose ancestors his empire had tried to exterminate. They were offering him mercy that he knew he did not deserve. I accept your terms, he said simply. The formal signing took place on a world that had special significance for everyone involved. New Harmony, one of the first planets the Empire had conquered, and one of the first to be liberated by the Confederation. Representatives from 47 species gathered to witness the end of 3 centuries of Imperial rule. Captain Hyunwoo, now serving as a liaison between Imperial and Confederation forces, watched the ceremony from the observation deck of his new ship. The Stellar Wind had been refitted with human technology and now served as an exploration vessel rather than a warship. "Hard to believe it's really over," commented his new first officer, Commander Lisa Park, the human officer who had helped with Admiral Taehyung's trial. "The Empire is over," Hyunwoo agreed. "But what comes next might be even more challenging. Building something is always harder than tearing it down." 5 years later, the transformation was nearly complete. Former Captain Da-yoon now commanded the exploration ship Unity, with a crew that included humans, former Calreth, and representatives from 17 other species. They had just made their most significant discovery yet. "Captain, we're receiving a response to our communication attempt," reported her science officer, a human named Dr. James Kim. "It's coming from the planet's surface." Da-yoon looked at the blue world that filled their main screen. It was Earth, humanity's homeworld, still scarred from the Imperial bombardment 3 centuries ago but showing signs of recovery. Small communities had been established in the regions where the atmosphere had been restored. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge belonged to an elderly woman who spoke with the accent of Old Earth English. "This is Director Sarah Chen of the Earth Restoration Project. Welcome home, Admiral Sarah." Da-yoon realized that the Admiral Sarah, who had led the Confederation fleet, was standing beside her on the bridge, tears streaming down her face. The woman she had known as a military commander was seeing her homeworld for the first time. "Hello, Grandmother," Admiral Sarah whispered. The reunion that followed was broadcast throughout the galaxy, showing something that had never existed before. Enemies who had become allies working together to heal the wounds of the past. Dr. Kyung-mi, now serving as the Confederation's chief xenobiologist, published her final report on the Imperial period. Her conclusion was simple but profound. The Calreth Empire failed not because it lacked strength, but because it never learned that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Captain Hyunwoo, exploring the ruins of imperial cities with teams of archaeologists from dozen species, found a memorial that had been erected by the last imperial governor. It read simply, "To those we conquered, we were wrong. To those we lost, you are not forgotten. To those who come after, learn from our mistakes." Commander So-min, now serving as a diplomatic attaché between Calreth and human settlements, helped establish the first joint colonies where former enemies worked side by side. The success of these communities became a model for integration throughout the galaxy. The unknown ship that had appeared and vanished had brought more than judgment. It had brought hope, redemption, and the possibility of a future where the mistakes,